As you heard, yeah, my name is Johan Vamstad. I work at the Center for Civil Society Research at Marie Cederschiöld University here in Stockholm. And I will be giving a presentation about our research on philanthropy at the university, but also I will talk about something called the Philanthropy in Europe study, which is performed by a research network called ERNOP. So I will go right ahead. And first I want to say something about our university and our research center. I just push ahead there. So I'm from this research center that is called Center for Civil Society Research at Marie Cederschiöld University. Marie Cederschiöld University is a rather small private university. It's located right in this neighborhood, actually sort of across the street, so it's very, very local. We are owned by 4 large sort of welfare organizations, non-profits, including Ersta Diakoni, which is also running this conference center that you are in right now. So as I said, very local. They also have the big hospital that is across the road there. So the Center for Civil Society Research was established in 2019, but we've actually been doing research on civil society as far back as 1992. So we are about 20 researchers at this research center, both sort of senior professors and PhD students and so on. And this is one of the priority research areas that's sort of promoted by the Marie Cederschiöld University. And the research began at something called the Sköndal Institute way back in the early 1990s, and the primary focus was initially on voluntary social work, but we sort of expanded to look at civil society more broadly, and also questions having to do with philanthropy and giving, which is sort of my specialty or my area within the research center. And we are today one of the largest research center in, I think we are the largest actually in Sweden at least for research on civil society and philanthropy and this sort of issues. I think it's more contested if we're the largest in the Nordic region, so I put that sort of in parentheses. Just to give you some example of the type of research on philanthropy and giving that we are performing here. I've listed a few examples. So the top one here is our national survey on civic engagement, which is performed. It's a national survey that is performed on a representative sample of the Swedish population, asking questions about voluntary work, charitable giving, and some other types of civic engagement. So we do this every 4 or 5 years. We've been doing it all the time since 1992, so we have a nice long time series. So a part of this study is about philanthropy and giving. We have a lot of sort of background variables and so on, so we can do quite interesting work on sort of giving behavior and that type of things. And also we have an institutional research collaborations with a series of different non-profit organizations, charitable organizations. Those are large organizations like, for instance, the Swedish Red Cross, Save the Children Sweden, Ersta Diakoni that I mentioned, the Swedish City Missions, and we do continuous sort of larger and smaller studies in collaborations with these, having to do with different types of charitable work and so on. Since we're sort of running a little bit short of time, I will just not say too much about the remaining things. We have I should say we had a program on philanthropy and democracy. It was sort of a more of a critical perspective on philanthropy, having to do with sort of democratic issues. It's not really that operative now. We have done studies on generosity in times of crisis. For instance, we did surveys during the COVID-19 pandemic. We are a regular contributor to something called the Global Philanthropy Environment Index, which is sort of managed from the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy in University of Indiana. And we are also a member of, an institutional member for a long time of the European Research Network on Philanthropy, which I will say more about. But first I want to say, sort of expand a little bit more on sort of the top example here, which is this National Survey on Civic Engagement. As I said, it's not entirely about philanthropy and giving. There's just some questions in the big survey that we distribute every 4 or 5 years. But I think the really strong point of our study is that we've been doing it for so long. So even though we don't have a multitude of variables to look at, being able to look over time, it still makes it interesting. So I will just give you a short example of that. I mean, there's so much that I could show. I just picked one example, and that has to do with fundraising. So this is a simple graph based on just one variable, so it's very simple, but it's based over almost 35 years. And what you see here are the results for a survey question addressed to a representative sample of the Swedish population. And they were asked if they had performed any type of voluntary work for an organization in the last 12 months. And almost half of all respondents had. So, and that's sort of consistent. We have that sort of a high level of voluntary work in Sweden. And then, for those who have said, yes, I have done that in the last 12 months, we moved on and asked, what's your main activity? What's your main task at this organization? And this is the results for those who said fundraising. And what I found interesting with this, although it's, as I said, just a single variable and a simple graph, is that we tend to think that fundraising is becoming more important. In fact, that's what our partner organizations are saying, and I think a lot of organizations represented here in this room today, and they know about this, that fundraising is becoming more and more important. But I mean, this of course, curve here sort of suggests the opposite, because back in the 1990s, you had as many as, more than 25%, 25-30%, who said that their main activity was fundraising, and we thought that was interesting. And now the last survey is from last year, 2024, and was down to 3%. So we thought that was interesting. So we starting to try to understand, how is this possible? How come that sort of fundraising as an activity has sort of gone down this radically? And of course, we start to look at, what was fundraising like in the 1990s? And we're sort of starting to realize that, well, maybe that was something that the volunteers did back in the 1990s, but it's not so much anymore. So since fundraising was perhaps of a lesser issue in the 1990s in Sweden, back in the 1990s, most organizations would primarily be funded by membership fees. So fundraising was a much smaller issue. But whatever fundraising was done by volunteers. But then, of course, since then, as you all know, there's been a process of professionalization. So there's sort of professional ad campaigns. You have, of course, social media that sort of don't require that many volunteers to reach a lot of people with fundraising. And you also have sort of the more basic fundraising that are done. It's usually done by people who are hired, for instance, like people who do phone calls and meet people up in the streets and so on. So I think what we're seeing here is a process of professionalization. And I think this is an interesting example of how just a simple variable can still be interesting if you look at it over a long enough period of time. So that's one example. I will just give one more example. And this is, I'm going to need a stick for this one, I think. I have to point a pointer. This is our most modern pointer here. So this is the results for different causes. So we ask people who have donated money, what causes have you donated money to? And these are sort of a few examples of categories of donations. And I know that the next speaker, who will be coming from the Swedish Fundraising Association, will give you much more detailed information about this. But just to give you a glance from our study, you see that international aid and medical research are the two biggest causes that people give money to in Sweden. And this has been consistent for I mean, we have data going back to the early 1950s, so it's been the same, it's international aid and it's medical research. And I think this is an interesting example because this is an area where Sweden sort of stand out a little bit, or the Nordic countries, because an almost universal truth about giving is that people tend to give more money to things that are close to you. But in Sweden, it's sort of been the opposite. We're always given more money to international aid than we give to domestic social causes, for instance, domestic social care, which is here in Sweden. It's much lower. And I mean, there's many explanations for this. Most have to do with the sort of the type of welfare state we have in Sweden, that we pay rather high taxes and sort of expect the government to take care of the domestic social care, while of course there's still causes on the international scene that needs to be addressed. And well, what about medical research? Well, I don't think anyone expects the Swedish government to sort of find a cure for cancer, so it's not within their realm of responsibility, so it's still an area that people have donated to. And as I said, for a very long time it's been the same. So domestic social care is much lower. I think another interesting part is that this, of course, represents 3 years, if you haven't figured out already. So it's 2014, 19, and 24. And the tendency is, of course, that it's declining in all areas, and it's also declining the total. So people, a smaller percentage of respondents are stating that they have given a donation in the last year. So it's going down, which is sort of consistent, I think, with the findings you will hear from the next speaker. So that's sort of the first half, actually, of my presentation when I talk about our research we perform here. I would also like to say something about a research network that we are a member of. It's called, and I hope everyone knows about it already, but in case you don't, I will just provide some extra information. So it's the European Research Network on Philanthropy, or ERNOP for short. It's a research network with about 26 research centers distributed all over Europe, also with other institutional members that are not research centers. So, for instance, professional organizations, umbrella organizations, and so on. And a lot of individual members as well. It was established in 2008 in Amsterdam, and it organizes a biannual conference and also a biannual knowledge exchange between academics and professionals in the philanthropic sector. And I mean, there's a lot of activities going on in this research network that we are taking part of. For instance, there is one mission to sort of translate research for practitioners. Sort of we have practitioners translating research findings into sort of practitioners' language. So it's called a research note. So you can find it on the ERNOP web page. So it's it's kind of a good example of the type of things that ERNOP wants to do. And it also performs something called the Philantropy in Europe study, which is something I would like to say a little bit more about. So Philantropy in Europe is a recurring comparative study that documents giving, so the volume of giving, sort of the overall volume of giving. But I think more specifically and perhaps more interestingly, also data sources, which is sort of why I found it fitting to talk to some of you here, because some of you represent organizations that are data sources for this study. We look at national numbers for giving from individuals, bequests, businesses, foundations, and charity lotteries. And we also make a qualitative evaluation of national data sources on giving. And this could be, for instance, examples from umbrella organizations, from charity monitors, as I said, from national surveys of different kinds, and in some countries, tax records are really valuable, also as data sources on giving. So we try to map the state of research on philanthropy by compiling these country reports on giving, and also sort of include information about sort of state-of-the-art research in different countries on philanthropy, and put this together both in sort of individual country reports for each of the participating countries, but also for sort of overview for the whole of Europe. And the next image here, or the picture, is sort of, it's a lot of information going on here. I will need my this one again. So we have the different. Maybe I should start here in the middle. So I have different types of giving here. So this is giving by individuals, bequests, or donations made in people's wills. And this is corporate giving. This is foundations, and this is charities. And of course, I think you all recognize that this is, I should say, this is borrowed from a report published by EarnUp. So this data. This is what we're trying to do is sort of characterize the data quality for different sources. So you look at individuals, and you look at this a lot of green, dark green, and if you go over here, you see that the dark green, of course, is so often something positive. This data is representative, it's valid. There's classification in categories, meaning that you can see what people have been giving to. There are background variables, which makes it possible to make more analysis about the data. Then sort of declining down to the red, there is also those that are representative valid and have classifications, but they don't have background variables, and so on and so on. And down here you have those areas we don't really have exact numbers, you only have lower bound estimates, which is a lot of countries. So if you look, for instance, at giving by individuals, it's quite a lot of green, so it's kind of good data. Bequests, a lot more red. Corporate giving, a lot of red in the Nordic region here, and so on. And so this is sort of our way of showing the quality of data sources, which is sort of a way of helping philanthropic research in all of Europe, being an infrastructure for philanthropic research, and also a way of communicating with the people who have these data sources, because of course we want to work with keepers of these data sources. We want them to be better, we want to improve them, and there's a lot of work going on with, I think, probably some of the organizations present in this room, but also many other organizations around Europe. And also, this study is being performed right now. We're doing the analysis, and we are starting to publish our country reports. There's an excellent one about the state of data sources in France coming out in just a week or two. Then there will be a string of countries coming out. And then the final, I think that's probably the next image. Right, the results from because, again, this is actually our last survey. So this is, if someone sort of reacts to the numbers there, that they seem low, that's because the numbers are from 2017. So that's the reason. But the study is being performed right now. And the next sort of version of the last image for the 2024 survey will be published in coordination with the International Research Conference that EarnUp is having in Heidelberg in September. And we also sort of, as I said, publishing these individual country reports. We're doing that actually this month. So we will have updated evaluations of these data sources. And of course, I mean, I should have said perhaps earlier, I'm not only a researcher here, I'm also a member of the board of EarnUp. Maybe I've suspected that I'm sort of partial here, and I also try to push people into memberships and sort of take part of the information on the website. And of course, registration is still open for the conference. I should advertise that a little bit. But yes, I think that was actually most of my information I wanted to say here, and we're almost on time. So these are some of my references here. Yeah. Okay,
well
so thank
done,
you.
Johan.
Sure.